Well, Canada's Victoria Mboko has made quite the debut at the French Open with a stunning win on Sunday.
The 18-year-old from Burlington, Nick's hometown, beat New Zealander Lulu Sun in straight sets to move on to the second round. She qualified for her first ever major with a win in qualifying round on Friday. Mboko, who was ranked in the 300s at the start of the year, plays Germany's #1 player, Eva Lees, in the next round on Wednesday.
So let's talk more about Victoria and the rest of the Canadian gang over in Paris. Let's bring in Mike McIntyre, host of Matchpoint Canada, the #1 podcast when it comes to tennis in this country. It's a must listen if you're a fan. Mike, always good to talk tennis with you. Let's set this up this way. When you and I first started talking about, getting this conversation going, you said, I'm going to come on and I'm going to talk about Victoria Mboko. And here we are. Mike, you're not surprised by this, but tell Canadians what we need to know about this incredible talent.
Well, she's following in a long line of great Burlington tennis players, Nick, I guess, following in your footsteps. And this teenager, she's only 18 years old, but she's already been on the radar for several years. I saw her play live for the first time 3 years ago at the National Bank Open here in Toronto. And even then, at the age of 15, she had a huge serve, and she was already pushing around some of these pros in qualifying. You knew that she was going to be a great thing down the road. Who knew it would come so quickly? But she shot out of the gates in 2025. She won 5 ITF tournaments to begin the year, which is the equivalent of like the minor leagues of tennis. Clearly, she's ready for the big leagues and playing the pros, and she's already pushed some terrific players this season. I remember tournament director from the National Bank Open, Carl Hale, saying to me 3 years ago, watch out for this kid. She's going to win this tournament here in Canada one day. And he felt very confident about what she could do. She's clearly proving that she's ready for more. She's on the cusp of the top 100 of the game. And this is her first Grand Slam tournament ever. And she played so well with so much poise in that first round win. Straight sets, 6-1, 7-6 against a more experienced opponent. She's got a great shot, I think, in the second round as well. And it's funny, even though she's the youngest Canadian in the draw in Paris this year, I think she's our best bet to actually make it through a few rounds here. Okay,
well, that's good to hear. And, if you think she's got a good game and Carl Hale thinks she's got a good game, that's a pretty good endorsement there, I would say, Mike. So let's talk about some of the other Canadians in the draw, or even, some of them haven't even made the main draw this year from, other injury struggles or whatever here. But who else should we be watching for?
Yeah, well, there aren't many, unfortunately, this year. And as you're aware, and tennis fans are aware, that red clay is not the favorite surface of Canadian tennis players. We don't have a whole lot of it here in our country growing up on hard courts for the most part. But Felix Auger-Aliassime and Denis Shapovalov, 2 names that have been on the scene on the men's side for many years now for Canada, are both seeded players, but they're up against some tricky opponents. Shapovalov is playing a Spaniard named Pedro Martinez. You don't want to play a Spaniard on clay, so this is going to be a tricky opening round match for him. And Felix, even though he started the year well on hard courts, going through kind of like a crisis of confidence, I would say, almost trying to find that consistency. Hasn't found it on the clay this year. He's going up against Matteo Arnaldi from Italy, also a pretty solid clay court player. So my expectations are limited for these two. Meanwhile, the younger players like Vicky Mboko and Gabriel Diallo, who's in his early 20s, on the cusp of the top 50 of the game, made the quarterfinals in Madrid recently. I really see these 2 young players as our best hopes on clay to potentially make it towards the second week of action. And, it's great for any sport to have that succession planning. You want to know there's that next wave of players coming through. And for Canadian tennis, I think our fans here should be really optimistic at what's coming up next.
Yeah, I saw Diallo at the National Bank Open last year and was totally impressed by him. Really quickly, on Matchpoint Canada, your podcast, Mike, have you spoken to Victoria Mboko? Like, what have you taken from that conversation, if you have?
Yeah, we've been talking to all these Canadian tennis players since they were literally kids because we knew that good things were coming. And Vicky's been fantastic. I talked to her a couple of days ago, just casually off the record to touch base on how things were going. She's full of positivity. She was on Matchpoint Canada back in February just talking about the strong start to the season that she's had. So I'd encourage anyone to check that out on our podcast. She's a fantastic individual, very positive, very upbeat, sort of typically Canadian, very polite. And I think she's going to be a great ambassador for the sport moving forward. And she's dealt with some injuries the past couple of years. So people may be wondering, well, where's she been since she played that NBO 3 years ago here? Dealing with injuries, finally healthy, and look what she can do.
Yeah, good to see that kind of talent emerging, that's for sure. Matchpoint Canada, check it out with Mike McIntyre, the podcast. Mike, always appreciate this. Let's hope that the Canadian run continues and we can chat again soon.
Yeah, I'd love it. Thanks a lot, Nick.